Now, when discussing the greatest video game consoles, and say it with me kids, of all time, it's simply impossible to ignore Sony's original PlayStation, which boasts one of the most enviable and diverse libraries of any platform in history. Plus, it also houses Bishy Bashy Special, Future Cop, LAPD, and goddamn Silent Bomber. So yeah, this thing is a bloody rose-tinted memory box for me and millions of other gamers around the world. Yet, as I've just proved, there are so many brilliant games on the PS1 that picking the 10 best was an arduous and frankly rather sweaty task, let me tell you. But hell, we're going to give it the old college try regardless. And thankfully, we've received some help in the form of Swift96, whose comment we picked out from last week's video to be included on this list. And if you want to be a part of next week's video, have a muse on what you would pick for the greatest video game openings. Now, while I think this opening intro is going pretty well, I'm sure you're getting fizzy, so let's get on with it. As I'm Jules, this is FGS, and these are the 10 greatest PS1 games ever. Number 10. Oddworld, Abe's Oddysee. Now, gamers of a certain age will surely have fond memories of playing Oddworld, Abe's Oddysee on a demo disc that was probably bundled with their PS1 console. But you know what? That full game, well, it's pretty damn great as well. Taking control of an embattled slave, Abe, as he attempts to rescue his fellow Madokan pals from being ground into meat, Abe's Oddysee is unquestionably one of the strangest games ever released for a PlayStation console. It's fundamentally a puzzle platformer, albeit one which allows you to possess enemies, ride creatures, and even fart, all in the pursuit of getting as many of your fellow slaves to freedom as possible. With its gorgeous art style and penchant for gallows humour, Abe's Oddysee remains a vaunted gemstone of the PS1's back catalogue more than 25 years after release. Its surprising sales success even led to a number of sequels and a terrific 2014 remake, each of them being well worth playing. Number 9. Tekken 3. Tekken 3 marked the point at which Namco's fighter game franchise was taken seriously, finally, as a true rival to the genre's crowned king, Street Fighter. Tekken the Third, as it's known in this household, improved upon its predecessors in every tangible way that a fighting game sequel could. Combat felt tighter, it looked beautiful, it boasted a stacked roster, and had tons of killer side content like the fan favourite Tekken Ball mode. Tekken 3 wasn't just revered within the fighting game community though. It's a rare title which broke through the die-hard membrane and became a bona fide hit with even the most casual of players. Adding newbie-friendly fighter Eddie Gordo to the lineup certainly didn't hurt in that regard. Mechanically perfect while also keen to get weird with its balmy cinematics and quirky characters like a farting dinosaur called Gon, Tekken 3 is the best of both worlds. A game that's serious about its gameplay but totally unserious about its style and presentation. Number 8. Crash Bandicoot 2, Cortex Strikes Back. Now, though many would have picked Crash Bandicoot 3 Warped for this list, it's the series' second game which achieved the best balance of creative gameplay and difficulty. For all of its brilliant innovations, Crash 3 was a casualized experience to a fault. Crash 2, meanwhile, splits the difference between the infuriatingly difficult original game and slightly too easy third, adding some welcome moves to Crash's arsenal alongside some of the most ingeniously designed levels in the entire series. I mean, it even lets you ride an adorable polar bear, for heaven's sake. The game introduced so many elements which would become series staples, like crystals and warp rooms, in turn delivering one of the most purely replayable platformers ever made. As such, Cortex Strikes Back is the definitive Crash Bandicoot game, and Crash 2 does what many great sequels do. It makes the original look positively prehistoric by comparison, yet doesn't invalidate its place in gaming history. And speaking of being etched into legend, why not make your stamp on history by hitting that subscribe button here on the FGS YouTube channel. It helps out the channel a ton, and you can stay up to date with my Friday list series, The Deep Cut with Jules Gill, baby, where every entry is either an obscure video game or a title you need to know more about. Cheers in advance, as I know you won't bail on me on this one. And speaking of grazed knees, let's talk about number 7, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2. Because Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2 is the GOAT where sports games are concerned. Taking the compulsively addictive gameplay loop of the acclaimed Extreme Sports predecessor and force-feeding it a jug of Red Bull, Tony Hawk's 2 one-upped everything about the original game. From the improved graphics to the game-changing introduction of manuals, which allowed tricks to be chained together, more expansive environments, and a sheer wealth of entertaining things to do, it is the rarest of games that just doesn't put a single foot wrong. It's easy to undersell the achievements of its tight, nimble control scheme, expert level design, and of course its perfectly curated soundtrack, but with Tony Hawk's 2 Neversoft alchemized not just the greatest skating game ever made, but quite arguably the single best sports title ever. True, skating's popularity may have waned considerably over the past decade, but the heart-on-sleeve love for this game, well, it hasn't faded one goddamn bit. Number 6. Tomb Raider. Now, it's impossible to overstate the influence that Tomb Raider has had on the action-adventure genre and video games as a whole. Simply put, no Tomb Raider, no Uncharted. If surpassed in complexity by its first two sequels, the original was a true watershed moment for the industry, offering players a mesmerizing degree of freedom to explore its expansive, beautifully eerie, danger-filled environments. And those dangers range from deadly traps to, well, dinosaurs, and despite the potential for tonal wonkiness, it all still managed to feel of peace. But Tomb Raider's greatest achievement is surely its heroine Lara Croft, who for all of her wanton sexualization remains the single most iconic femme fatale in gaming history, bar none. If you can forgive its dodgy, ill-aged tank controls, the original game still holds up incredibly well for the most part today, and without it, gaming would look very different in its current form. Number 5. Resident Evil 2. Now, Resident Evil 2 is often compared to the original survival horror game in the same vein that Alien is compared to James Cameron's Aliens. That is to say, it's a slicker, more action-packed and high-octane follow-up which takes the franchise to bold new heights. That Resident Evil 2 manages to be so much bigger without sacrificing any of the original's gut-wrenching tension is a masterful achievement in game design on Capcom's part. The Raccoon City police station within which most of the game takes place is one of gaming's all-time most strikingly atmospheric and unforgettable gaming locales, adding in layers of complexity to the original's labyrinthine mansion. With its intense set pieces, challenging puzzles, and innovative inclusion of 2 intersecting campaigns for Leon and Claire each, Resident Evil 2 elevated everything that made the first game great. And while the remake did a fantastic job updating it for modern tastes, the original remains supremely playable in its own right. Number 4. Gran Turismo 2. Now, the original Gran Turismo blew the doors off the racing genre, melding eye-watering photorealistic graphics, for the time at least, with the most fine-tuned simulation gameplay imaginable. But rather than spring for gimmicky innovations, the first sequel simply offered up a ton more content within the same pitch-perfect gameplay framework. With far more cars, tracks, and races on offer, Gran Turismo 2's lack of visual growth was tough to complain about, especially as the original game still looked so damn impressive. Subsequent sequels certainly got shinier, but Gran Turismo 2 achieved a meaningful expansion of its predecessor without indulging in the bloat which would become an increasing issue later down the line. For a game that was rushed out to meet a Christmas deadline just 18 months after the original, it's staggering that Gran Turismo 2 feels nothing like a cash grab, but genuinely like one of the most vital racing games ever made. Number 3. Metal Gear Solid. Now, Metal Gear Solid was the gateway drug into stealth action games for many players, a mechanically complex, beautifully cinematic, and delightfully weird offering which confirmed Hideo Kojima to be one of gaming's few true auteurs. From its drum-tight sneaking gameplay to its wonderfully creative boss fights, world-class voice acting, and peerless art direction, every aspect of Metal Gear Solid felt fresh and daring upon its release, and it still holds up all these years later. It's easy to picture a version of this game which simply collapsed under the weight of Kojima's lofty ambitions, and yet every single piece interlocks in perfect harmony. Whether it's your favorite Metal Gear game or not, it was like nothing else being made in the industry at the time, and has aged spectacularly for the most part. That said, fans certainly wouldn't turn their noses up at a remake, the development of which has been long rumored. Number 2. Castlevania Symphony of the Night. And so, my friends, we arrive at the spectacular choice submitted to us by Swift96, Castlevania Symphony of the Night, which is, without a shred of hyperbole, one of the greatest video games, not just for the PS1, but possibly in all of recorded history. This is a diamond-like refinement of what the series had introduced prior and shone brilliantly on the PS1 when it dropped all the way back in 1997. Instantly capturing attention with its Renaissance painting-like art style and soundtrack that will just live rent-free in your head forevermore. Coupled with deviously challenging gameplay, boss battles that stand head and shoulders above others in the franchise, and a ludicrous amount of replay value, Symphony of the Night is just that. A swooping, all-encompassing serenade that will enrapture your senses. There is a good reason why this title is held aloft or pointed to whenever a new Metroidvania hits the block, and that's because any pretender to the throne has some pretty big secret boots to fill. And number 1, Final Fantasy VII. And finally, the number 1 spot simply couldn't go to any other game. Final Fantasy VII holds a landmark place in gaming history for introducing millions of Western gamers to the RPG in all of its epic time-hogging glory. But even beyond that, it's an astonishingly well-made and engrossing game. From its impeccable art direction to addictive combat, politically spiced narrative, unforgettable musical score, and terrific cast of characters. As convoluted as its story might be, Final Fantasy VII is a game packed wall-to-wall with all-timer moments for not merely the genre, but the medium as a whole. Even with the current remake project now 2/3 complete, there's a magical timelessness to the original game which makes it incredibly easy to pick up and play today. And though Final Fantasy has grown to become a mammoth entity in the decades since, it's this entry which remains its greatest expression of creativity and the spirit of adventure. And there we go, my friends. Those were the 10 greatest PS1 games ever. I tell you what, that was a trip down memory lane for me, and I enjoyed every bloody step of the way. So let me know what you thought about it down in the comments section below. And I know that there are way more than 10 great PS1 games, so let me know down below which one you would have put on this list. But also, while you're doing that, make sure that you put in your suggestion for next week's episode, which is, what do you think are the greatest gaming openings ever? As always, I've been Jules. I hope you're taking care of yourself and treating yourself with respect, because you are bloody ledges, my friend, out there, and you deserve the absolute best. And if you want to chat to me on the social medias in between these videos, then why not go over to Instagram, where I'm at RetroJ, but the O is a 0. And if you're looking forward to my next content drop, then make sure you tune in this Friday at around 2:30 p.m. GMT, where I'll be doing another deep cut list with Jules Gill, baby. That kind of rhymed, but forget about it. I'll see you soon. Big love. Bye.